Welcome back to the Automation Podcast, the world's number one industrial automation product and technology show. Thanks to you, our audience of highly skilled automation professionals. Thank you for being a member of our audience, and thank you for tuning back in this week. Now, for those new to the show, my name is Shawn Tierney of Insights in Automation, and each week I invite a new vendor to come on the show to tell us about their products and technologies. And during their presentation, I play the role of the audience, asking questions I think you may have and questions I have as well. Now, given that a quarter of our audience listens to the show and doesn't actually watch it, I will try to call out any visuals that I think the listen only audience may want to know about. Now, with that said, I am very happy to welcome to the show for the first time Dan White from Opto 22. We've been covering their products on the morning show for a couple of years now, and they got some really cool stuff. And Dan, before you jump into what you're going to tell us, how you're going to bring us up to speed on these products, could you first tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Originally from Boston, born and raised up there, went to Tufts Engineering School up outside of Boston, where I studied electrical engineering. But immediately knew I needed to get out of that cold weather after my whole childhood up there. I said, I'm going to try some warmer climate. I moved down to South Florida. And at the time, I actually hooked up with a manufacturer of marine HVAC equipment. And in that role, I was where I first got my introduction into automation, really. We didn't study much about PLCs and control systems getting an electrical engineering degree. It was really more about the theory and some of the programming. But at this company, I got my exposure to automation, and it was with none other than Opto 22 gear.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was back in the early 2000s when our Snap Pack system was the main bread and butter product for Opto. And back at that time, I went out to Opto 22 for training. I learned everything about the Snap Pack system, and I'll never forget because my wife, now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I said to her, this Opto 22 company is really neat. I know I'm just starting out with my current role, but this is the kind of company I'd love to work for someday. And fast forward about 7 or 8 years later, I got to meet some of the guys at Opto 22 and I had just finished my MBA and I was able to join the team in a regional sales type of a role. So you're actually catching me after about 10 years at Opto. I switched from a regional sales position and I just recently moved into a new marketing role. So, as our director of technical marketing, what I do at Opto, it's really about teaching. It's about teaching, what the products do, teaching how the products are currently being used. So, whether that's the form of, case studies that I've written on specific customer applications, doing demos, presenting at trade shows and speaking opportunities. That's the role of director of technical marketing, and that's what I'm up to these days.
Well, and you guys do some great. I love covering your. One of the things I like about your case studies are, at least since we've been covering them for the last couple of years, is you guys get into the technical part of it. Like the one I was reading to the audience today, or covering for the. I didn't read the whole thing, but was they needed serial ports, and so you can have up to four. So I remember this being. It's like I can have four serial ports, like RS-45 Modbus RTU serial ports per module, and I can have a maximum of four modules. I'm like, that's 16 Modbus RTU ports. And so that kind of detail, like a lot of the major manufacturers, when I talk, the guys in number one, two, or three, the big names that are as big as, they do other things besides automation too. A lot of times they're fluffy and it's like, but one of the things I know with Opto 22, and you guys have a great line of products, is that you guys do the technical, and I appreciate that as somebody who's spent a career hands-on with the PLCs, HMIs, VFDs, and so on. So I really enjoy that, and the you just have seem to have a great staff. You got Ben Orchard, who's constantly doing blogs, and other people doing videos and blogs. So I'm excited to have you on. You know, you know, I often rave about PLCs with with displays on them. Your PLC has a massive display on it. It's like, wow, this thing's like the size of a cell phone, right? So I'm
Yeah, I
looking
think
forward to learning about it. And as the audience of the morning show knows, the Groove Remote IO or RIO, that can now also be a Code Sys PLC. And
that's
so
right.
it's just very cool. So I'm kind of excited. I mean, we've been talking for a while to get you on, and I'm really excited about going over this stuff with you and learning more about your platform. And let me turn it back to you.
Well, I think you hit on something really interesting there too, and I think a big part of it is, most of our guys are engineers, our marketing folks, our sales folks, guys like Ben, in fact, Ben, similar to myself, was once a customer of Opto 22 before he ever joined the team. So we've got people that really that have used the products, that know how other engineers are going to be trying to use the products, and so we know that we're a company of engineers designing products for engineers, writing case studies that we know engineers are going to be reading. So it's good to hear that that's well received on your end.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
And so with that, do we want to jump in and talk about
Please.
the latest and greatest? So, um, when I started at Opto, like I said, SnapPack was the latest product, and we had just started our foray into what's now known as IIoT and digital transformation type of products. Um, so at that time, we had launched something called a Groove box, and it was a small Linux box that went alongside your SnapPack systems, and it was basically, a secondary box that would give you these IIoT capabilities. And it was right at this time, after about 5 years with that product, that we made the foray into developing a fully brand new automation platform in Groove Epic. And Epic is actually an acronym, Edge Programmable Industrial Controller, kind of like
Okay.
PAC was an acronym for Programmable Automation Controller. We felt like we didn't want to just call this thing a PLC,
Hmm.
because it's not just a PLC, and it solves a lot of different problems that traditional PLCs had, and so we wanted to make sure we kind of gave it a brand new name, and for a brand new type of product. And I think one of the things you mentioned was the screen on the front. That was a huge part of it, of course, having that screen. Some of those early problems of taking your PLC, if it's Ethernet based, plugging it in, waiting for it to issue some kind of a boot request so that you could find a MAC address and assign an IP address. No more is that. You can just go on here right on your front screen and do some of the easy setup, like configuring your network interfaces and so on. But before I jump into the software and all that,
Yeah.
let's do a quick talk about just the hardware itself. Now I've got both my Groove Epic right here in front of me. I've also got a Groove Rio, as well as a secondary Epic that's also plugged into a touchscreen. So that's one of the first things I want to point out, coming back to here, is that all Epics have a HDMI port, so they
Oh,
can actually be plugged directly into an external monitor.
awesome.
And yeah, and using the USBs, so there's two USB ports on an Epic. You can actually interface with a touch interface or keyboard and mouse. So it's not just being able to see the data, it's actually being able to interact with your control programs, with your HMI, right from the front screen of the Epic, or a larger monitor if you want to just explode it out to a bigger view. And while we're in here under the hood talking about the different ports, so on top of HDMI, I mentioned Serial can do, some of your touchscreen and keyboard interfaces.
Hmm.
You can also support, coming back to that serial topic from earlier, you can support serial ports on there. So USB to serial converters. So you could even have more than just the 16 that we mentioned, and it'll support USB hubs as well. So you can expand that USB capability. You can add additional storage. You can even add Wi-Fi using a USB to Wi-Fi dongle. We've got a number of approved dongles that work with the Epic. So, and the Rio, of course. Then additionally here right next door, we've got your Ethernet ports. So a big part of the Epic's design is the dual segmented Ethernets. And of course, on this rack, I've got 4 IO modules. We can do anywhere from 4, 8, or 16, or in even some cases, we sell what's called the chassis zero, a chassis designed just for the Epic with the touchscreen interface and the power supply, and essentially give customers the ability to run this as an edge gateway. We'll talk about some of those capabilities as well, but you don't necessarily have to purchase IO if you're looking for more of a IPC type of an application. So that's the physical hardware.
Can I
With
interject
that,
with a question?
yeah, please.
So you said 4 8 over 16. Is that a backplane or an active backplane or passive backplane? What is physically, is that some kind of, You got it all right there. Okay, that's what it looks like. All right, great.
Yep. So it's a physical stainless steel chassis.
Okay.
We experimented with some of the different kind of daisy chain type designs
Yeah.
where one module snaps to another
Yep.
to another. It didn't meet the reliability concerns that we had, so we wanted something that was a little bit more firm. And like I said, it was 4, 8, and 16.
So let me ask this: does this allow me to take a module out from the middle? So that's the problem with the Slice I/O is you typically can't remove a module, right? So would this allow me to like remove a module in the middle and replace it without interrupting the other ones?
Absolutely, and they are hot swappable. To
Okay.
your point, yep, hot swappable IO modules
Now I
for
also
sure.
noticed on there too it said "Made in the USA." Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so one of the it's one of the different things about Opto 22 compared to a lot of the other automation manufacturers out there. We do make everything in the USA. Our
Nice.
headquarters in Temecula, see if I can go to our about page. Our headquarters in Temecula is where we really do it all. We design, we support, we manufacture. I mean, we're a full electronics manufacturer. We've got all the through hole, surface mount, solder wave machines, and yeah, we do it all right there at our headquarters in California, in
Wow.
Temecula.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for back to you.
Yeah, great. So with that, I was actually going to now kind of jump in on the software side.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about the Ethernet interfaces, and that leads me into this topic of cybersecurity. So you'll notice when I browse to the host name of the Groov Epic, and this happens to be the one up on the desk over there, and this here is the one right in front of me, you'll notice that I do have a secure HTTPS connection. We do support HTTPS with self-signed certificates or certificates that you can go out and purchase from a certificate authority. And so that's just step one of cybersecurity. Now, the other part here is username and password authentication. Every Epic and every RIO for that matter, when you get it brand new, it has no username, no password. There are no defaults. There are no back doors. The first thing you need to do when you commission your Groov Epic or RIO is assign a username and password. And please don't lose it because there's only one way to get back to factory resets, and that's to stick a paper clip, and you'll lose everything on the Epic when you do that. So I'm going to log in now with my Epic with my username and password. And before I even move off of the topic of usernames and passwords, one of the things that we decided to incorporate into Epic is the idea of LDAP. So Active Directory, you may not, your IT department may not just want this device on their network with its own local users. They may want to manage the base of users that can log on to an Epic. Just like any PC or any Ethernet enabled device on your network, if you don't deploy it properly, it's not going to be cyber secure in the way that you want. So here I've got some local users that are set up on my Epic, but we've also got the ability to set up lightweight directory access protocol, meaning Microsoft LDAP can IT departments can now manage who's logging onto their Epics. So right before you even get started with Epic, you've got your username authentication, you've got options for IT managed users, and you've also got the ability to support security certificates and so on. Um, and while we're on the topic of cybersecurity, I don't want to move off that yet because I think it's really a huge part of it. This product was designed with cybersecurity in mind from the ground up. So you'll notice right on the home page here, we've actually got a security tab. Here's where you can access the security certificates, both on the web server certificate. So this is the one that'll allow me to download a certificate that I can apply to my web servers to basically make sure that my connection to the Epic is encrypted. And then there's others as well. So the other point I wanted to make here was your firewall. It's a fully configurable firewall. So when you deploy this Epic out into the field, you can make sure that you're only allowing access on the ports that you want access on. Furthermore, if you're deploying it in a modern IIoT architecture where you're taking advantage of MQTT Sparkplug, heck, you can have all the ports closed. You can have this device configured simply to broadcast and make outbound connections to brokers. And some people get confused about that. They go, well, if it's outbound only, what if I want to make a change? It's outbound originated. It doesn't mean outbound only. It means the connection is originated from the Groov Epic to the broker, and you can still have bidirectional communication. It's just you don't have to open ports or expose ports on your Groov Epic to do that. Now, sort of switching gears, I want to talk about just some of the what I call blocking and tackling, to use an American football reference, IO and control. So you can see here on my Epic, I've got 4 IO modules. Of course, they're all populated here on the screen. If I had a 16 slot chassis, they would populate there as well. Just the simple stuff like being able to log in, go to my IO, see what's happening in real time, toggle points on and off from a web browser, can make configuration changes if I need to, whether that be configuration changes to how this particular point is accessed, or the name of the point, or in some cases, we have configurable IO modules where you might configure it as a 4 to 20 milliamp or a 0 to 10 volt and so on. But there's some other great stuff in here that solves a lot of problems for installers. Like, you ever been out on the factory floor and you needed a wiring diagram, but internet service was spotty? Well, we've got all the wiring diagrams, we've got all the specs, we've got all the details, including, when the hardware was deployed, and even the ability to update module firmware. It's not done commonly, but here and there we do have bugs, and we're not unwilling to admit that. And so when that happens, if we have to, we can actually update firmware on the individual module level, not just on the entire system. Also, to kind of talk a little bit about the IO services, there are tools in here for, even if you're not using modern MQTT or OPC communications, you've got tools for being able to actually look up addresses. So if I want to read a value from an analog channel and I know it's on module 2.5, rather than digging through a big old manual, I can see, hey, there's that value. It's at Opto MMP, that's our internal addressing,
Mm-hmm.
address FO26 2140, or it's at Modbus unit ID 4246 unit 21. So some of just the nice tools, having the screen, having the web interface, making this stuff more accessible and saving people time out in the field. That's your IO. Switching gears here to talk a little bit about control. So, as we deployed this product, and for your information and for your audience's information, it's under the hood, it's a Linux-based PC. It's running
Mm-hmm.
something called a Yocto build, which is a custom Linux build that we deploy. So we can still control what gets installed on here. It's not that it's wide open and someone's going to install Minesweeper on their Groov Epic. It's just not like that. We've got a lot of different tools for being able to install software. I'm going to jump into that a little bit later, but for now, I want to talk about just the two traditional programming environments. So if anybody out there is an Opto 22 customer, they might remember software called Factory Floor, called Cyrano, or called IO Control. And we've had a lot of iterations over the years, but essentially our flowchart-based programming, which you can see right here, has come with us since the 1980s, and we don't plan on leaving it behind. So it's a really great tool for process control. It uses flowchart-based programming. Here you can see, if I push a button on my Groov Epic, you can actually see the path of the flow change and the little LED light up under my finger there. And then, of course, it'll flip back. So this is one way of programming the Groov Epic in a way that Opto 22 customers would be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And within this flow charting, you don't just have flow charts. You've also got the ability to write scripted text in what we call OptoScript. So a lot of versatility within this platform. It has external drivers to talk to Modbus, and we have other toolkits to address our IO with open source softwares like C++ and Python and so on. But ultimately, Pack Control is our homegrown programming software. And so for that reason, greenfield application that uses Opto 22 it's probably going to be the best fit. However, in recent history, we've actually added this other option, which is CodeSys. And I'm sure your audience may know a bit about CodeSys, but for any who don't, it adheres to the IEC 61131-3 standard for PLC programming. So because I'm operating a real-time PLC engine, I can't run both at the same time. Our quad-core processor doesn't allow for two simultaneous real-time threads. we want to make sure one or the other is getting the real-time thread. So you'll see here, if I try to enable the code sys controller, it's going to tell me, well, that's okay, but you're going to disable the pack controller if you do that. I'm not going to do that yet, but I do want to just pull up a code sys screen here to show those who may not be as familiar. It has all the programming units that PLC programmers are used to: function charts, sequential functions, structured text, uh, you know, function blocks, if I didn't say that, ladder diagram. So if you're used to programming with rungs and coils and so on, which I honestly, that wasn't my background, but I appreciate that there's a huge base out there. We've got two different options for being able to program in a PLC programming environment. So and this works native with every Groov Epic. We also provide a free CodeSys runtime license with every Groov Epic. You mentioned before the RIO also can support CodeSys. That is a $100 adder because it wasn't built into the price, but with the Groov Epic, we've included the CodeSys right in there, so you can just get a free license.
So it sounds like if I'm an Opto customer for a long time, I would use the pack because that's what I've been using, right? So this flow
Mm-hmm.
charting software. But if I've used CodeSys in other applications and I'm coming to Opto 22, I may want to stick with CodeSys because I already know it and I'm familiar with it, and I like function
Absolutely.
blocks or I like ladder logic. So you do both. You can't run them both at the same time, which makes sense to me because you'd be really cutting the CPUs in half, and why would you want to do that? And you would never need them both at the same time. I don't think so.
And
But
there's something else
yeah,
here, which I'm pulling up on my browser, which is the CodeSys store. So CodeSys, in addition to, our pack control software talks great to our stuff. It talks great with Modbus stuff. But if you want to start getting into other device drivers like Ethernet IP, like Profinet, those are all available in the Siemens Profinet, Allen Bradley Ethernet IP. Those are all going to be available in the CodeSys store for a small price. In that case, I think it's at 180 for the Ethernet IP license. Although our customers actually do get a discount, so it's about under $100 for an Ethernet IP
oh wow,
CodeSys license. So your Epic could actually de facto operate just like an Allen Bradley PLC master and talk to Ethernet IP slave devices, or it could be the slave device. However your application, we like to make it flexible so that customers can develop their applications for their needs.
yeah, yeah,
And so that kind of covers the two different programming environments in terms of traditional PLC programming.
sure,
But there's more. So there's other ways to program your Epic. One of those ways is actually in what we call shell. I don't know if you're a Linux guy, but and I'm certainly not a Linux expert, but I know a little bit enough to be dangerous. And so for a free shell license that our customers can request, they can apply it to their Groove Epic or RIO, and they can enter the Linux shell. Now, we've got a lot of great developer tools up on developer.opto22.com, including, API libraries for communicating to our gear with Python, with C++, with RESTful APIs, with .NET. So there's a lot of flexibility if you get into the Linux shell. And we like to say, to use a quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So of course, once you get into the Linux shell, you can certainly do some damage if you don't know what you're doing, or if you do know and you just mess around too much. And but you can always get back to a factory reset. So and if God forbid somehow you can't, we guarantee that we will get your Epic back to a factory reset, even if that means we have to ship you a new one or take yours back and fix it up for you. So that's a little bit about some of the other programming tools on the Epic. Now, the other ones that aren't hidden underneath the shell, one of those is Node-RED, and I'm sure you've heard of Node-RED and come across it plenty. Um, I'm not sure how well your audience all knows Node-RED, but Node-RED is a really neat tool, and we're seeing customers use it in all kinds of different ways, whether that be moving data into databases like Microsoft SQL or MySQL, or getting data from databases. And we've got some different example flows here where we're getting weather from a weather station, or getting the spot price of electricity to make real-time decisions on whether to operate a windmill for an application. even things like texting and tweeting and emailing, and it's all there. It's all capable to be done in Node-RED with Node.js, and so just another nice tool. We Node-RED, of course, is not our software, but we felt that it was a third-party software that worked in the open source, that would help our customers to accomplish a lot of the things that they might want to accomplish, um, without having to pay license costs. Now I'm gonna change gears a little. Oh, let me see. Where do I want to go next? There's always a lot to talk about. I think before I jump into Groove View, which is something that really makes this unique, I want to just quickly pass over the data service node. So here we've got our data service. So not many know this. Hopefully more will know now. Groov Epic can be an OPC UA server, meaning it can expose its own IO, its own program, uh, variables as OPC server. There's a lot of ways to serve OPC data. You might have noticed over here when I was in Node-RED, I even had an OPC node set up. So you can run OPC in Node-RED. You can run your own Epic as an OPC server. You can run an OPC server through CodeSys to expose data tags that way. We've also got our own native MQTT publisher. So whether you use MQTT string payloads or Sparkplug-B, and we are an official Sparkplug-B provider, we've got this ability to essentially scan our local devices, whether that's the local IO system or the local control program, and be able to publish those data out over MQTT or expose them over OPC. Of course, that makes it a lot easier to, democratize your data, to get your data where you want to get it. And we like to make sure that it's easy to do, and it's built on a secure, open standard type of architecture. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about Groove View. On every Epic, this is not on a RIO, although it's fully compatible to be used with RIOs, but doesn't run on board the RIO. We've got this software called Groove View. Groove View is a fully web-based HMI. So if I come in here and I go into build mode, you'll see I can actually create and develop these pages not much differently than the way I would make like a PowerPoint slide, by clicking and pointing and dragging and dropping. And I can configure all my various devices. Let me slow down and go to configure devices. Now you can see here, I can add Opto 22 IO units, of course, to here. I can talk to OPC UA servers. Those can be from third-party devices, third-party servers like KEP server,
Mhm.
or ones that run in Ignition. I can communicate to Modbus devices. And we've also got our data store, which is a REST API repository for data. So within this Groove View software, I can really make screens that look however I want. And normally this is where I jump over to our demo.groove.com, and I log in, and any of your users, listeners can log in here. If you go to demo.groove, and that's GROOV with no E at the end, .com, you can log in with the username trial and the password opto22 and see some of the stuff that we're doing with Groove View. Here you can see our in-office studio demo, where we've got the ability to control, a stack light that's connected to other PLCs. In this case, you've got your Siemens connected to the green, your Allen Bradley connected to the red. I can turn on and off the turbine. This is actually real building data from our compressors, for our air compressors, for our pneumatics and stuff that run in the factory. And so, there's all kinds of different great stuff to see here on demo.groove, from, real world simulated applications like the one that we did with Cal ISO wind farms, to water treatment type applications, to, we call the kitchen sink, just show some of the versatility of the different gadgets and stuff you can build. So it's really, if you can imagine it, you can put it together in Groove View. And everything in Groove View is designed to be mobile responsive as well. So I'm going to hit F12 here and show you, this is what it would look like on my mobile phone. And that's because everything you develop in Groove View, you've got both a desktop and a handheld version that you can test. So they're coupled in that they both have the same items on them, but they're decoupled in terms of how you can lay them out and make sure
Got
that
it.
they're responsive to the right device.
Now, can I ask you a question? This looks really awesome. Okay, Groove View. Can
Mm-hmm.
I? can I have Groove View displayed and control it from the HDMI and USB port on the front of the unit?
Yes,
So I
correct.
wouldn't even have to. All I would need is like a touchscreen that supported HDMI and USB, and I could program Groove View and then have my HMI right on the front of the. I don't have to buy an HMI.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. And you know, the GrooveView also has some other really neat tools like an event logger. So you can actually create events like an alarm or an overflow
Hmm.
or a temperature is too high. And every one of those events, you have tag conditions that you can specify, like here where I say if the panel temperature goes above 85 degrees for at least 3 seconds. And then that can send custom email messages as well. And all that gets configured within GrooveView. You've got your project configuration here where you can specify your email SMTP server settings and so on. So, I've got a number of different customers out there that use GrooveView almost like a paging system, like an alarm
Sure.
system
Absolutely.
for when things go wrong. And then, so all of that kind of leads me to the next one, which is all of these tools are really great, but when you start getting into big enterprise level applications, that's where you may want to turn to a SCADA software
Hmm.
that is even more scalable and powerful. And Groove you can run on your Epic. We also have a version called Groove Server for Windows.
Oh,
You can actually download and run Groove Server for Windows on your PC, and you can actually, if you want to, there's a free trial of it on our website. You can go download it from our site. Getting started with the trial, and you can check out all this information on how to take it for a test drive.
hmm,
Um, but when you start getting into, like I said, bigger enterprise level applications, that's where you may want to turn to something like Ignition. So I think on this Epic, I just recently upgraded the firmware, and I believe my Ignition. I wanted to show it to you this way so that you could see it's just like Ignition running on any other machine. This is what would, if
okay.
you installed it on your computer, you would get this same message and you would have to create usernames and passwords and so on to go with it. And you can probably guess my password. Um, and I'm going to launch that gateway. But while that one's launching, I'm going to just pull up into my other Epic here because I believe this one's already got an Ignition gateway up and running. And this one I've got doing a number of different things. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we see customers using Ignition at the edge on their Groove Epic.
Now, question
So there's
for
a
you:
few,
Does
please.
does it come with an Edge license, or is that something you go to Ignition to purchase?
So it does not come with an Edge license, although
Makes sense.
our Groove Epic, for any of your customers that are looking to get started, any of your listeners, I should say, that are looking to get started,
Hmm.
we do have something called the Groove Epic Learning Center. And you'll want to select the one with the two at the end. This was the most recent revision of it.
Hmm.
These do come fully assembled with a Pelican briefcase with a full ignition dev license for Edge, meaning it runs full ignition Edge and perspective. Um, so we do have that with our learning center, but a standard Epic is not going to come with Ignition
Yeah,
Edge licensed. It's
makes
just
sense.
pre-installed and ready to go. And by the way, I didn't point out here, it can run Ignition or Ignition Edge. So you can specify
Oh,
which you want to run because at the end of the day, both Ignition and Ignition Edge are actually running the same software. It's just some internal reorganization, flipping of some bits and this and that to
sure.
create a different structure. So we do run into some cases where a customer might need one specific module out of Ignition, and it may be more beneficial or more economical for them to run it on their Epic. Although for the most part, I don't highly recommend that. I think Ignition Edge is the Edge platform, and it's meant to run on Edge devices like your Groove Epic.
Hmm. Hmm. And it looked like in
Why might
that
you want
page
to?
that it looked like on that page we just looked at, like you could actually buy the license from Opto 22. Is that correct? It says down there
Yes,
you can buy the
we do.
licenses.
Yeah, we do sell just a standard Edge 8 license,
Okay.
which is the Edge IIoT license. So it's going to have your OPC, your MQTT, your store and forward capabilities, Edge Sync, Edge administration. We do sell that, and you could also purchase it directly from Inductive Automation if your preference. If customers that may already have a relationship
Yeah.
with Inductive, they don't have to necessarily come to us for it.
Sure. Sure.
I see customers of ours using Ignition for a number of reasons, kind of a three-pronged approach. One of those prongs is they want to take advantage of the OPC UA device connections. As you probably know, and many of your listeners probably know, a traditional PLC isn't the most cyber secure device. Now, we went through and talked about all these different cybersecurity features on the Groov Epic, and the way that we'll see this done is one of your Ethernet ports is your plant network. It's your trusted network of all the devices that your PLCs, your VFDs, maybe you've got some PCs on your plant floor, and that network is a sort of a closed network. But on the other side of your Epic, you've got a totally dedicated, isolated Ethernet port. That can be the one that goes out to your IT side, to your untrusted network of the internet, the wild, wild west, if you will. So what we see a lot of customers doing is utilizing one Ethernet port with the onboard OPC capabilities to get data from these, legacy PLCs like the Logics and the Siemens and so on, and Modbus devices and everything I'm scrolling through here. And then on the other side, they can make that secure MQTT publish and subscribe connection to a broker, to the cloud, to wherever they want that data to go. What's more, we've even got, and we didn't chat about this yet, but we've even got capabilities to be able to do what we call port redirect. So if you could imagine a PLC on your plant network that you wanted to maybe make some changes to the program on it, well, you can't put that thing on the internet. You're exposing yourself to the
Yeah.
wild, wild west. But if you put it to the internet through your Groov Epic, you can actually initiate port forwarding, port redirect rules that will allow you to temporarily make that connection, be able to make changes to a downstream device, and then wash away the tracks once you're done and disconnect. And now nobody can access it, without security. So getting back to, Ignition on the Epic, we're seeing customers using it for that reason.
Hmm.
Then you've also just got your traditional Ignition edge-based architecture, right? You may have this device is out there. Imagine a water application where it's out at some remote pumping station or remote lift station. The Epic can act as both a PLC and as an edge gateway. And what that'll do for you is allow what they call edge sync. So you can store and forward any data. If your edge network, your edge node, your lift station, whatever it is, loses connection to the internet and can't make its connection back to the central server, it'll buffer up to 30 days worth of data in there, and
Wow.
then it'll fully backfill your historian, so you're not losing any of your data. Also, with Ignition, you've got great MQTT transmission modules. All of the MQTT transmission is included with the Edge IIoT license. So now you're not limited. We have our own native publisher I showed you, but you're not limited to just a single connection. Their MQTT transmission module from Cirrus Link can make multiple connections to multiple servers. You can see I've actually got this one publishing to 2 right now, with different sets of data. So I can say, hey, I want data ABC going here and XYZ going there and LMNOP going over there. And I can specify which data I want transmitted where. So it's a really feature-rich MQTT architecture within Ignition Edge. So that's some of the reasons why we see customers running Ignition on board their Groov Epics. There's a lot of different use cases for that and different ways you can connect data from other devices and be able to get it into a larger Ignition architecture or even a larger MQTT based architecture. So that that kind of covers all the different functionality on the Epic. We've also got some of these other tabs are really more, like under maintenance tab, you can perform a full backup. So if you deploy an Epic to the field and you want to deploy another one just like it,
Yep.
or if you want to have a backup, a spare waiting, a hot swappable, spare waiting on deck, you can fully back up your project. It'll back up everything except for your PLC program, which could be either the pack or the code sys, and your Ignition Edge project, which of course you can just back up directly through Ignition and pull a backup. So other than that, all your certificates can be backed up, all your settings can be backed up, your accounts and so on. So you can really have a quick backup ready to go. And we always recommend doing a backup anytime you might do an update. This is where you do a system-wide update. So we handle our updates in a full monolithic firmware update, meaning just because a new version of Node-RED comes out, we're not going to just be able to update that instantly, at least not easily without getting into the Linux shell and being able to do some under the hood magic. For most of our customers, we recommend waiting for us to QA test
Hmm.
everything
Hmm.
and get the latest and greatest versions in, and then we release full firmware updates that you can then pull right off our website. And one last little cherry on top, all the information about the Groov Epic, from its about status to the documentation to API documentation, is all linked right on the actual device. So you can see I'm pulling, this is our Swagger API document, and it's living right on this Groov Epic using its
Nice.
host name. Any other questions for me? I don't know how we're doing on time.
I think we ran through pretty much everything. It's really like a Swiss Army knife of programmable controllers. I think let's talk about the Rio, right? And let's talk about, so I have my Groove Epic, and I can have 4, 8, or 16 local modules, right? Well, then what
Mm-hmm.
if I need some distributed I/O? How many of these Rios can I have in a system? Let's say they're acting just as I/O. Like, is there a limit? And I think, like, how dense do these Rios come? I mean, do they come with 4 in, 4 out, 16 in, 6 out? Tell us a little bit about the Rio.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up too, because it'll give me a chance to tease you on some new products that are coming
Oh, all
out as
right.
well. One of those is, we don't actually have a name for it yet, but customers who are used to our old SnapPack products
Yeah.
might remember that on those racks, you could either have a controller, which was a full processor with a control program, or you could have what we used to call a brain, which was just an IO processor. A
Okay.
Rio is just, of course, an IO processor with some IOs. And what we're coming out with, because a Rio is a standalone device, you can daisy chain a few together, but by the time you've daisy chained 3 or 4 Rios together, you get to the point where you may as well purchase another Epic system, another rack,
Okay.
because it's going to be more economical. So we've got a version of the Epic. It's a processor like the one in front of me here, but it won't have a screen on it. It'll essentially be a simple I/O processor for Groov
Oh,
Epic.
okay.
So if you need to add lots of I/O in one spot,
Hmm.
you could probably purchase one of those. Now, if you're looking to add a few here, a few there, and this is where the Rio really comes in big. So, and I'm glad you brought up the Rio, because we really didn't even talk about it, and it's one of the most popular products we've ever had. So I pulled up what we call a Rio Explorer here. The Rio, there's 3 versions of the Rio. Let me pop back over to the main website for a sec. There's the Rio version 1,
Hmm.
which is the original. It's the one I've got on my desk here. It runs CodeSys, and it has full 10 IO points that are all configurable. You've got your MM2, similar Rio to the first one, only it has additional RAM and additional hard disk space. So it can run both CodeSys and it can run Ignition Edge on board. And then we've also got a third Rio, which is a Rio EMU, designed just for energy monitoring up to 600-volt, 3-phase, Delta or Y. So this is really more of an energy monitoring device. But when we talk about the standard Rio, and I'm going to pull up the Explorer here, it's a single part number that can be configured in thousands of ways. So if I click on point 0 here, you can see that point can be a current input, a voltage input, a millivolt input, a thermocouple, ICTD, thermistor, discrete input, discrete counter input, or even a self-powered discrete input, meaning it provides its own wetting voltage.
Hmm.
All of those inputs, and it could even be an output. So you've got, just one of the 10 points could be configured in a dozen different ways almost. And as I go through the list here, you'll see things change a little bit. Once I get to the second half of the I/O, now you'll see more output capabilities like analog outputs for voltage and current, and so on. And then, of course, the last 2 outputs are relays. Now, if you wanted
Okay.
to add more than two of these things in one location, at that point, I'd probably recommend purchasing a rack with additional IO. But if you just had one or two or a couple, or if you have dozens of them, but they're spread all over, I imagine we have a lot of customers in the cold storage and supply chain,
Yep.
cold supply market. And I imagine a lot of them using Rios as, for remote temperature monitoring. You can plug up to 8 of these ICTD temperature probes, or 8 thermistor module, into a single Rio. And if, you could have, and there's no hard limit to how many Rios you could have running on one single Epic. We don't, it'd have to be 100 or so before you'd start to deal with performance issues. I think,
Now let me
we
ask
don't
you
have
about
it.
that. And you don't need to show me this, but so let's say I'm in the Groove Epic and I want to add distributed I/O, whether it be a Rio or another Epic rack. Is it easy to do? And what's the protocol I'm using? Is it going across Ethernet? And is it
It
like a Opto 22 protocol?
depends which program you're using.
Okay.
If you're using our Opto 22 pack control, it's as simple as clicking, I want to add an IO unit.
Mm-hmm.
I browse down to my
Okay.
Groove
Yep. It's
Rio, and
all
you
there.
see the 3 different versions.
Yep.
And let me just put one in here for I'll just call this Test Rio 23, because I don't
Okay.
know how many I've already got set up. And I'm going to put in a fake IP address,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to set it up.
So it is
Once I
Ethernet. Okay.
Yeah, then once I go in here, it uses our native Opto MMP protocol to
MMP.
communicate over Ethernet, and here I can specify all the different IO modules. Now on the CodeSys side, um, similarly it uses the native Opto protocol that we've provided with CodeSys. So
Mhm.
this program you're looking at here is actually set up for a Rio.
Okay.
This is just a little simple program that I loaded onto my Rio. But yeah, same deal. You add it as a remote IO, and it can communicate using native Opto MMP.
Okay. Now I can use a Groove Epic as a distributed I/O header for 16 modules, but I can have all the programming in the master Groove Epic.
Sure,
Okay. Okay.
sure. And
So, okay.
going back to your question too about, how is it addressed? Normally, if it's an Epic talking to a Rio, you're going to address it using the Opto native protocol. But, let's say you had some, other PLC that wanted to talk to a Rio. I mean, all that IO is available, accessible on Modbus as well. So,
Oh, all
we
right.
don't like to make it too closed off. We want to make sure if it can fit into an architecture, that a customer can access it in their architecture.
So those three Rios, we looked at three part numbers. Those all support MMP, which is the native Ethernet protocol for Opto 22, but they also support Modbus TCP as well.
Yep.
Okay.
And as well as they all have their own onboard OPC UA server,
Okay.
they all have their own onboard MQTT client, and they all have their own REST API. So you want to make an HTTP request, and you can read and write HTTP to the
Sure.
IO. Um, all those capabilities. And let's see, I've got a Rio here I can log right into. It looks just like the Groove Epic when you log into a Rio. Runs the same, what we call Groove Manage, which is this software that's the
Okay.
overlay that allows you to administrate all the other tools on board.
Sure.
And from here, you can see there may not be as many tabs. Like on this one, we've got tabs
Hmm.
for Groove View and Ignition. My Rio doesn't run Ignition; it's the MM1 version,
Okay.
but you can see it runs the same software.
Same
Um,
interface.
Similar with the IO, I can come in here and make changes to IO in real time, change the type of IO it is, and so on.
Interesting. All right. Great. So now I can see where you're talking about that future project product, which is a Groove Epic without the display. For if I was going to use it for a distributed I/O application, I probably wouldn't need a
Mm-hmm.
display on it. So I can see why you guys are coming out with that now.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I can't think of any other questions. Was there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to cover? That was a lot.
If before we go, because I think
Sure.
I pretty much nailed everything I wanted to on the product side, and I hope that your audience leaves this with a sense of, that Groove products can help them to deploy their own application, right, rather
Hmm.
than being locked into this type of ecosystem. I would love to point out some of the great resources on our website.
Oh,
I
please.
already showed you the developer webpage, which is where you can get a lot of the information on the APIs or how to write custom programs with Groov Epic, on Groov Rio, or even on a separate PC and talk to the Groov Epic and the Groov Rio just as remote IO. The other one I'd really like to point out is our training website. So we do offer an in-factory training, which is $9.95 per person. We do them about once a month, maybe 10 or so a year. But the other thing we offer is what we call Opto University, which is full training modules for all of our products, all free, all online,
Nice.
accessible to anybody. And here you can see we've got everything from setting up the hardware, plugging it in, configuring Groove Manage, writing programs in Pack Control or CodeSys, pick your poison, how to use the OPC server, how to use Node-RED. I mean, we've got, believe it or not, even though it's not our software, we've got some of the most watched Node-RED videos.
Sure.
I know Terry Orchard, one of our other engineers, he's related to Ben as well. He has put out some Node-RED videos that have gotten tremendous, tremendous viewership online. And so, anybody looking to get started with Opto, definitely check out the training page, the developer resource page. The other thing I want to point out is our forums. We have a factory manned online forum
Nice.
where, if you've got questions, we've got answers. And guys like you mentioned, Ben, are very active on the forums. In fact, I don't think you can get a question up there without him replying to it, even if it's the middle of the night. Sometimes it seems like he's like sitting by waiting to answer these forum questions. So factory forums, free training tools. You already mentioned that we're made in the USA, but I'd also, there's so many great, easy ways to get information from our engineers. Heck, if I go to our front homepage here, you'll notice this little chat bubble. A lot of websites have these chat bubbles, but not a lot of websites actually have a person on the other end ready to respond to that chat bubble. So, you know, we've got those, we've got forums, we've got training, we've got all kinds of ways to access our guys. And if you even just call up to 22, one what is it, 951-695 opto, I challenge you to do that and a person will answer the phone. So, I know not a lot of companies operate the way that we do in this day and age, but I think it's what makes Opto unique and why a lot of our customers really do love working with us. Why I loved working with Opto as a customer so much so that I jumped at the opportunity to join the company when I did.
Well, I tell you, I feel like I went from like just knowing you guys through your press releases and case studies to having a much like I feel like I could pick out a bill of materials now. Not saying that I haven't watched the training videos, so I'm not saying I could program it, but in any case, Dan, I really appreciate it. I know we've been trying to get together for a long time, and I really appreciate you coming on and going through all this.
Yeah, and if you do need help picking out a bill of material,
Hmm.
right at the bottom of our products tab, you'll find the system configurator tools. And then this is our Epic configurator where you can actually specify, which Groove Epic processor you want, whether it's the version that runs Ignition Edge or not, that has a more hard disk space. Select which software licenses you may want. If you want to buy an Edge license, if you need a shell license and CodeSys, specifying which power supply option, and right down to choosing IO modules. So if you're looking for help building that bill of material, you can come right in here and say I'm looking for an analog input that handles milliamps, and you're going to get
I like that.
the
Nice.
the variety. So there's the isolated version that can handle 8 IO. There's a non-isolated version. They're all isolated between the control
Sure.
side and the field side, but each
Channel
point
to
is
channel.
not isolated
Yeah.
there. Exactly. And then we've also got this one listed, which is the multifunction module.
Mm.
Just like that Groove Rio has thousands of ways you can configure it, so does this multifunction module.
Hmm.
It's got the same IO layout as a Groove Rio, and you can add that to your project as well and give you all that functionality. So
Hey, while I'm here, do you have to buy slot covers to fill in any slots you don't use?
you don't. We do have like a little. I think they come with little plastic dust covers when
Okay.
you purchase them new.
Okay. Because I see it. You don't see the pins when you don't have a module in there. It's like it may already have a cover on it. All right, great.
I think they just come with a little dust cap.
Hmm. which is good. So, I mean, you need that. You want that, right? But
Hmm.
that's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate that. We look forward to having you back, maybe when you announce the new product we were talking about. But in any case, I want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, and stay tuned for Groove Epic and RIO firmware 4.0, which is
Ah,
coming soon, and I'm told is going to support containers and potentially Docker. And so I
wow.
know that those Linux developers out there, many of them are looking for easier, faster ways to deploy at scale, and those are the kinds of tools. And those are the kinds of things that we're doing. We're trying to keep a beat on what the industry wants, what the industry needs, and we're always looking for feedback. So any of your audience members are listening and have some ideas on how we can make our products better, we're always open to it.
Are you open to people connecting to you with you on LinkedIn using your
Absolutely.
professional account?
Absolutely. Yep. I'm
Okay.
Dan White, Director of Technical Marketing. You'll find me on LinkedIn, and follow Opto22 if you would. And we've got a great YouTube channel as well. And there's all kinds of resources out there. So thank you again, Shawn. It's been really great. I know I did a lot of talking, but you had some great questions for me, and I hope your audience enjoys.
Yeah, thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. And I want to thank Dan for coming on the show and really giving us a great tour of the Opto 22 Groove Epic and Groove Rio. Man, I learned so much. Very interesting products. Now, if you did enjoy that episode, please give us a like, a sub, and a share. And thank the folks over at Opto 22 for sponsoring this episode so that it was completely ad free. Wasn't that nice? I also want to mention that you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll see that below, as well as join my new membership program so you never miss any of the content I produce, whether it's sponsored or unsponsored. And with that, I just want to wish you all a great week. I want to wish you health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.